Well, this is a Disney-related story, a little different, perhaps, from most Disney-related stories. It has to do with copyright and the fact that Mickey Mouse may have landed a new role as a villain in a horror movie. And this is all because the copyright for Disney's 1928 animated short film, Steamboat Willie, has entered the public domain for the first time. Joining me to talk a little bit more about this is John Rizvi, copyright lawyer, also known as the patent professor. John, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you.
I think we tend to forget about just how old things are or what changes when they enter the public domain. How big of a deal is it that Steamboat Willie is now in the public domain?
Oh, it's a huge deal. I mean, this is perhaps Disney's most iconic character. It's the original version of Mickey Mouse from 1928, and the copyright's term was extended to 95 years, and that expired yesterday, January 1st, 2024. So it's now part of the public domain, and as you mentioned at the beginning, there's already announcements of horror flicks using this character.
Which seems like a really big leap for Mickey Mouse, but perhaps I'm guessing people were waiting for this day to come and for it to become in the public domain. Maybe if you could back up a little bit, I maybe should have started with this. How does it all work as far as, and you mentioned that the copyright had been extended and that this was a protected character. How does all of that work?
Yeah, so, copyright protection, initially it's got its roots in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 grants to authors for limited times protection for their works. And this limited times initially was interpreted to be 14 years for copyright protection. And then it expanded to 28 years. Again, there's been a lot of pressure. Some people call these extensions. The cynical view is to call them the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, because from 28 years it went to 50, and then 70, and then 95 years for corporate for works created by corporations. So 95 years, and that's how over time the copyright term has expanded, leading up to yesterday for several years. There's a lot of hope that perhaps there would be another change or extension, and none came about. So there was no reprieve on the copyright, and now Mickey Mouse is finally in the public domain.
And how does that work as far as when you talk about the work that and the extension? Who actually owns it? And is it an extension in that the owner can simply pay and get an extension, or do you have to make an argument?
No, there's no payment for the extension. It's just the duration of the copyright, and it remains in the original owner has rights, and as long as the copyright is not expired, they have the ability to stop anybody else from using it, and that's what Disney has done aggressively for years. So in order to maintain not only the financial profits on Disney merchandise, but also to help maintain Disney's image. And that's the biggest risk that I think Disney faces now, is not the sale of merchandise, because they still have their trademarks, and which is trademark law protects their branding. So anybody that tries to sell merchandise or films or anything that confuses consumers as to the origin, and consumers believe they're buying a Disney product, Disney can take action against sales of that nature. Where they're powerless, though, is to stop others from using the Mickey Mouse character, as long as the person makes it clear that it's not affiliated with Disney and it's not a Disney product. And clearly any sort of horror flick using Mickey Mouse, it would be hard for Disney to argue that consumers believe it's a Disney film. So Disney's not going to have much ability to really stop those types of use of Mickey Mouse going forward. At least the original Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse, which is the black and white Mickey Mouse that a lot of people know. The slightly more updated version is the Mickey Mouse with red shorts and white gloves, and that copyright is still in force until 2036. So we have about a dozen or so more years of that copyright still in force. that expires. But the original Steamboat Willie version is fair game now for anyone to use.
And it would obviously be the Disney Corporation. We know Walt Disney passed away quite some time ago, but it would have been the corporation then that kept the copyright going. Why do you think that after fighting or after hanging on to it for so long, they've now let it go?
So, well, it wasn't voluntary. It's not, there just is no provision in the law for an extension after 95 years. So, saying that they let it go is not really that accurate. They're helpless to stop it, to keep it ownership and the copyright from expiring. There's nothing they could do at this point.
Okay. Who decided that 95 years was the limit?
So that's the Copyright Act in 1998. That was the extension. And that was the last time the Copyright Act has changed the duration of a copyright.
And I guess we've seen similar things happen with copyright coming out. I saw a story earlier today, and I had actually forgotten about this. I have not seen the movie where Winnie the Pooh is, again, kind of the villain, a bit of a horror-type slasher movie. But again, that was something, and I'm guessing people who wanted to make that were waiting, and when the copyright ended a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And that... And certainly there were people waiting for Mickey Mouse to expire as well. This date's been known for some time, and the new trailer that was just released yesterday for a film known as Mickey's Mousetrap, the director said the film is already done. The release date is in March, but the fact that they didn't finish the film between January 1st and 2nd, clearly it's been something under work for some time.
And so that would be fine as far as somebody knowing that the copyright was running out. There was no chance of an extension because that 95-year mark had been met. You could be building that, or they clearly have been building that and making that, but as long as there's no release of it before the date?
Yeah, exactly. They're not doing anything wrong as long as they don't mislead consumers into thinking that Disney has endorsed their film or somehow license them, or they're an official, Disney's a sponsor, or somehow any kind of affiliation could be problematic. So they have to make it clear that this is not a Disney film.
Have there been cases then where that hasn't been clear, or companies or the makers of things that maybe encroach on the brand have been either sued or held to account? I'm thinking of Avenue Q, which comes to mind with the puppets that look like Muppets, but if you saw Avenue Q, it was not how you would remember Muppets when you were a kid. Have there been cases when people have in pretty public ways broken those copyright laws?
So if the copyright's in the public domain, it's as long as the character, the further out of character you take the main character, the less likely you are to run into problems. So a slasher type horror film of Mickey Mouse is way less likely to be seen as a Disney film than something more along the character of the Mickey Mouse we all know and love. So I think the more, it's almost, from a legal standpoint, it's almost an enticement to really make the character evil. And the more horror-like the character is, the less likely consumers are to believe it's a Disney-endorsed film.
Right, which would explain, I guess, why we've seen, I think there's been a second horror film separate from that first one that's been announced that is just going to start production later on this year, that we might see more of those. We probably won't see many films with Mickey Mouse, say, riding on a steamboat.
Exactly. And who knows, I mean, right now there's still there's still some novelty to these iconic copyright characters expiring. There haven't been a lot of them yet. In the coming years, we're going to see Bugs Bunny, Bambi, Peter Pan, Batman, and it remains to be seen whether the novelty of these unique takes of these iconic characters is going to wear off. Of course, with the Winnie the Pooh film, it was somewhat new, it was novel, it's exciting maybe to go see this new take, but once we see the Mickey Mouse horror films and then a couple others, is it really going to be that novel. Are we going to see this as a trend? I don't know.
And you kind of answered my question. I was curious if this is kind of the start, or Winnie Pooh was the start of the copyrights coming off some major names. And is that, did they all kind of come about around the same time, and that's why we're seeing them all come off now?
Yeah, exactly. And these are the oldest ones, and of course the copyright extension of 95 years. We're getting the earliest characters now, becoming part of the public domain. And then over time, we'll see the later ones lose copyright protection as well. So we're seeing the first few kind of horror takes of these characters. And I don't know, I haven't really seen any on how Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, how the horror film did in terms of revenues and whether it was a commercial success. But if these are commercially successful, then we're likely to see these types of films continue. If the public loses the novelty, they no longer find it exciting to see a dark character of an iconic, loved, copyrighted character. If that no longer holds their interest, then we may not see this as much going forward.
Right.
Right now, there certainly seems to be a lot of interest, a lot of demand. So we'll see if that holds.
And once it's in the public domain again, and with already two Mickey Mouse horror films being announced, so it's up for grabs for anybody. And as soon as even if one person takes this and makes a film, another person could make a very similar film.
Yeah, absolutely, they would. Now, of course, they can't be too close to the first person's film, right? Because those copyrights are going to be still in force. So they're going to have to face that. They of course, are not going to have any worry from Disney's copyright on Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse. But certainly if there's two horror films based on Steamboat Willie, whoever is second needs to be aware that they're not infringing rights of the first. So they can't be too close to one another either.
Right, and makes sense. Does it apply to, say, the music of Mickey Mouse as well, or is it specifically the copyright of the characters?
It's specifically tied to the characters.
All right, so the MICKEY, is that a song then that people could use, or that is a copyright song?
That's copyrighted. I'm not sure of the year or the duration of when that expires.
All right. Well, it is very interesting to see how people have been waiting for this and are already making this Mickey Mouse character into a very different character. John, thank you so much for your time today. So interesting to talk to you about this.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.